Tonight, Ottawa looks to end the BC port strike again after unionized workers reject a tentative deal. The possible return to the picket lines, putting Canada's busiest ports in peril.
It needs to end, and we need to have a solution.
Ending the immediate dispute does not resolve the underlying issues.
As labor disputes across the country drive more strike action.
This has to change. It has to change now.
Assessing the damage after a destructive hailstorm.
I came home to the tree lying on his car.
The community cleanup following another severe weather slam. Plus, from Montreal to Mexico on foot.
Following the monarch butterfly.
The months-long marathon raising awareness about an endangered species.
CTV National News with Sandy Rinaldo. Reporting tonight, John Ehrlichman.
Good evening. Deja vu is playing out in British Columbia. Late last night, more than 7,000 port workers rejected a mediated tentative deal for the second time, putting workers and their employer at an impasse. Today, Canada's Labour Minister stepped in looking to end the dispute. CTV's Kevin Chirac has those details.
Less than 24 hours after the International Longshore and Warehouse Union rejected a tentative deal, the federal Labour Minister issuing a statement and not mincing words. It reads, "I have directed the Canada Industrial Relations Board to determine whether the union's rejection of the tentative agreement has eliminated the possibility of a negotiated resolution. And if the board determines that to be the case, Ottawa will then have the power to impose a new collective agreement or force the two parties together for one final binding arbitration to settle the dispute." One expert calling the government's move a band-aid solution.
That just essentially kicks the can down the road. And also just so we would just see these problems resurfacing later on, and perhaps in even worse conditions.
According to the BC Maritime Employers Association, the proposed deal included a 19.2% wage increase over 4 years, bringing the median salary up from $136,000 a year to $162,000 a year, plus a near $3,000 signing bonus, 18.5% increase to retirement payments, and benefit coverage for casual trade workers.
We must tell them to come to the table!
So far, the dispute, which included nearly 2 weeks of strike action earlier this month, has disrupted an estimated $10+ billion in trade.
This is a huge issue, not only for businesses, but for families who are struggling with affordability, but it also could cost jobs and our international reputation in the long term.
The dispute impacting small businesses like this Vancouver wine importer.
There's very little that I can do about it at this point, so I just got to roll with the punches.
And forcing the temporary shutdown of a Canfor-owned pulp mill in Prince George, the company supporting Ottawa's move to step in. The port workers have been without a contract since March 31st. CTV News reached out to the union for comment on if another strike notice is imminent, but we didn't receive a response. Kevin Chirac, CTV News, Vancouver.
And labor tensions are also flaring up in Ontario. Nearly 4,000 Metro grocery workers walked out today after rejecting a deal. CTV's Beth McDonnell on the rise of worker discontent happening there and across the country.
Those looking to pick up groceries at Greater Toronto Area Metro stores were met with closed doors. 3,700 workers hit the picket line today across 27 locations.
Interest rates, inflation, CEO profits soaring, profits in terms of what corporations are gaining soaring, while our members are struggling to get by.
Tammy Laporte works full-time in the fruit department and relies on subsidized rent, while some of her colleagues use the food bank.
It's time for us to stand up and fight this company and tell them we want more.
Unifor, the union representing workers, says despite Metro putting together the best agreement in decades, it's not enough, arguing they put their lives on the line during the height of the COVID-19 crisis, then had pandemic pay cut. Metro is apologizing to customers and says it's disappointed the deal was rejected.
We have offered competitive wage increases and benefits and pension, improvements that are the highest in the industry.
In Manitoba, 1,400 Liquor Mart employees walked off the job this week, also demanding higher wages. Some experts watching the labor market say since the pandemic, workers have a heightened sense of worth coupled with anger and resentment, dealing with the rising cost of living.
In the case of the Vancouver Port and the Metro grocery stores, remember, these are very profitable companies, so these companies can absolutely afford to pay more.
This past fall, 55,000 educational support staff in Ontario went on strike. This spring, Job Action slowed Passport and Canada Revenue Agency services as 155,000 federal workers demanded more.
I think we're seeing an uptake in labor militancy. I think there will be lots of labor disruption in the future.
Metro's contract could set a precedent. It's one of more than 24 collective agreements Unifor is planning to bargain with major grocers over the next 2 years. John?
Okay, thanks, Beth. 6 people are dead after a small plane crash in Alberta. The plane took off last night from an airport near Calgary but lost communication about 30 minutes into the flight. Search teams located the wreckage shortly after dawn on the face of Mount McGilvery, southwest of Kananaskis.
Recovering the bodies of the pilot and the passengers was very challenging due to the difficult terrain. However, all 6 bodies have been successfully recovered.
The pilot and passengers were from the Calgary area and were en route to BC. The cause of the crash is under investigation. And a tragedy on the front lines of the wildfire fight. Another young firefighter was killed in the line of duty while battling a blaze in northeastern BC. The 25-year-old from Ontario died after his vehicle rolled over a steep drop on a gravel road. It is the 2nd death in the province and 4th across Canada during this year's historic wildfire season. The lights are still off in parts of Ottawa tonight, more than 24 hours after an intense summer storm, and as crews race to get the power back on, residents are surveying the damage and picking up the pieces. CTV's Jackie Perez reports.
Cleanup continues after a severe thunderstorm swept through Ottawa, bringing with it heavy winds and golf ball-sized hail dropping from the sky.
The weather was kind of intense. There was lots of rain, some hail, wind.
Michael Walsh and his wife were home when the storm passed through his street in Carlingwood, knocking over a large maple tree onto his home. The deck above the garage ruined. The roof also damaged. Luckily, no one was hurt. Friday's thunderstorm didn't just knock out trees. At the peak, it left nearly 50,000 customers without power across the region. Hydro crews working around the clock to restore those still without.
We were out until 6:45 this morning.
Marianne Bradley lives just around the corner from Walsh. She wasn't home when the storm rolled through.
And the root is really wide and it's about 4 feet above the ground and then it goes back in the ground.
That same tree crashing down onto Paul Nichols' Subaru Forester.
And I was trying to protect myself from the hail, not really thinking of the wind at the time.
Nichols was heading west on Carling, finding shelter under Bradley's big maple tree.
The winds hit, blew it sideways and hit the passenger side first, went across the top of the car, but it collapsed the passenger side right down.
He was able to escape from the back seat without any injuries.
So now the next step, I have to go rent a car and go through that and find a new car and wait for the insurance to get back to me.
Restoration efforts continue, and Hydro Ottawa says they're working with forestry crews to remove large trees off of hydro lines. As the hydro strike continues, the company says their contingency plans took into account storm responses, and they have additional resources available to support over the weekend. Jackie Perez, CTV News, Ottawa.
As Ottawa cleans up, the federal government wants to clear out 39 million COVID tests. According to an internal government memo, the feds are sitting on stockpiles from last year after a wave of new infections. Health Canada suggested donating the surplus to the World Health Organization and the Canadian Red Cross, or even paying manufacturers to take them back. Most of the tests will expire in 2024. An update on the military coup in Niger. The U.S. is now threatening to freeze economic and security assistance if the country fails to reinstate its president. Niger, a key Western ally in the fight against Islamic militants, had financial support by the European Union cut off after its president was ousted. There is concern Niger's new leaders may move away from Western nations and form an alliance with Russia's Wagner mercenary group. And more than 100 mercenaries from Wagner Group have moved closer to the border with Poland, prompting fears of a spillover of war. The advance coming as many Ukrainians marked a solemn anniversary. CTV's Heather Butts explains.
Gripping photos of their loved ones, these are the Mariupol defenders, killed 1 year ago during an attack on a prison where they were being held by the Russians. We have no right to forget them, says Yulia, who lost her husband. After 86 days of defending Mariupol, thousands of Ukrainian soldiers were captured. Fire later ripped through a hangar housing some prisoners of war, killing 53. Russia and Ukraine have accused each other of the attack. President Volodymyr Zelensky today calling it one of the most vile and cruel crimes of Russia. In the heavily contested eastern part of Ukraine, 2 more people were killed in Zaporizhia in a Russian missile attack. And today, the Polish Prime Minister says more than 100 Wagner fighters have moved near his border, calling it a step towards a further hybrid attack on Polish territory. This as Russian President Vladimir Putin wrapped up his high-level summit with African leaders in St. Petersburg, seeking stronger economic ties. Speaking about his withdrawal from the Black Sea grain deal, Putin said as prices rise, companies will make more money, claiming Russia will share the profit with the poorest countries. Others argue he's putting global food supplies at risk.
The decision made by Russia to tear up this agreement is hurting millions who depend on Ukraine's grain and wheat, as well as those, even if not directly receiving that grain and wheat, who benefit from the fact that with that wheat and grain on markets, prices are kept in check, kept lower.
The U.S. Secretary of State calling it a weaponization of food. The collapse of the deal threatens to push up food prices worldwide and tip millions into hunger. John?
All right. Thanks, Heather. A devastating explosion at a warehouse storing firecrackers in southern Thailand killed at least 10 people and injured hundreds. The blast blew off roofs and walls. Rescue operations are underway for victims trapped in the debris. Officials say the blast was caused by a technical error during construction work on the building. Coming up, shining a spotlight on Shein.
I feel bad for the workers that are making my clothes.
The controversial clothing retailer now in Canada. Plus, a dangerous nosedive baffling beachgoers. We have some dramatic video to show you of a small plane crash landing this afternoon in the Atlantic Ocean off the coast of New Hampshire. Beachgoers watched as the plane slammed into the water, flipping tail over nose before righting itself again. The pilot escaped the wreckage and swam to shore. Witnesses then helped pull the plane out of the water. Shein has been on a worldwide tour. The online clothing retailer has been launching pop-up stores, and this weekend it brought one to Montreal, but the brand is both popular and polarizing. CTV's Vanessa Lee explains.
Known for trendy clothing at low prices, this was the lineup to get into the Shein pop-up store in a Montreal suburb. Shoppers here say it's worth waiting in line for.
You can go out with maybe 10 clothing for $30.
You wait a long time to get your stuff, and now they open a store for a few days, so it's a good chance to get what you want fastly.
Based in China, Shein is an online giant that produces thousands of garments and accessories at lightning speed. It's now considered the market leader in ultra-fast fashion.
I think one of the keys to our success is our on-demand business model. This allows us to produce ultra-small batches of products between 1 and 200 garments. In response to real-time demand, we can ramp up production.
As it touts making fashion accessible to all, it has come under fire for everything from ripping off designs and fueling wasteful consumption to forced labor.
The controversy with Shein, I think, in terms of the manufacturing, starts with the fact that it's been documented by several think tanks and institutes that there's production happening in Uyghur sort of labor camps.
In a statement, Shein says it has a zero-tolerance policy against forced labor. To enforce our suppliers' compliance, regular unannounced audits of supplier facilities are conducted by in-house certified auditors and industry-leading third-party verification agencies. Adding those found to be in violation will be immediately suspended.
I feel bad for the workers that are making my clothes, basically. But at the same time, I feel like there's not enough competition. Like the stores we have here in Quebec don't do enough competition to them.
3 independent designers are suing Shein, accusing the retailer of racketeering and egregious copyright infringement. The company says it will vigorously defend itself against this lawsuit and any claims that are without merit. Vanessa Lee, CTV News, Montreal.
Football fans flocked to Halifax today for one of the CFL's premier events of the season. The defending Grey Cup champs Toronto Argonauts hit the turf against the Rough Riders for a showcase match in a part of the country desperate for a team of its own. Extra seating was installed in the stadium at St. Mary's University for today's sold-out crowd of nearly 11,000 people. And as CTV's Hafsa Arif reports, the Gridiron guests came from far and wide.
Go Riders! It's a sea of green as passionate Saskatchewan Rough Rider fans made their presence felt as they marched through the city streets, displaying their team colors.
They're an awesome team, and I would love for them to do well against the Argos, who are undefeated this season so far.
I'm a Rider, big Rider fan, and the opportunity to combine going to the Rider game plus visiting Halifax was really the draw for me. Yeah, so it's been great.
Some even coming from as far as Montana to watch the game.
Because the Rough Riders are our life. We need to support them. It's because of our support that they're going to go really far. And they'll probably give me a couple of free tickets because I really support them.
While it's easy to get lost in the green, at the tailgate, groups of Argo fans were eager and ready for their team to rough up a few Saskatchewan players during gameplay.
Best team in the CFL, undefeated. About to be 6-0.
Hopefully they win.
Toronto all the way.
Yeah.
Don't you think?
Yeah.
While some are gearing up to head to the game, others sip their drinks at bars around the city. The game playing and drinks flowing are what bars are hoping for.
There might be a few people in to watch a pint and want to catch the game on TV.
While the CFL only reaches as far east as Montreal, football fans in Nova Scotia are plenty, and many want to see a CFL franchise here in the Maritimes.
To have a stadium here, to create a social license that will allow this very diverse community that Halifax has become to come together. We do it for the Wanderers, we do it for the Mooseheads.
We need to get a CFL team in Halifax in the Maritimes. The hospitality has been fabulous and just a lot of fun. People are great.
Fans are full of predictions and cheer.
It's a Rider win. Yeah, it's a Rider win.
The crowd will be behind the Riders today.
Go
Riders!
Hafsa Arif, CTV News, Halifax.
For the record, the Argos won today's game 31-13. Still ahead, a marathon from Montreal to Mexico following the flight of an endangered insect. It's one of the great annual migrations. Every year, monarch butterflies make their way from eastern Canada all the way down to Mexico. But monarchs are an endangered species, and this year they'll be joined by a long-distance runner to ensure their journey continues for years to come. Here's Sasha Tiemann from CTV.
It's the moment Montrealer Anthony Bata has been waiting for. The 39-year-old lawyer is running from Montreal's insectarium all the way down to Mexico to the Monarch Butterfly Biosphere Reserve in a 4,500-kilometer journey, which he is doing all on foot.
A year ago, I had this crazy idea of running towards Mexico City and basically following the monarch butterfly in his winter trajectory.
Bata will be running an average of 50 kilometers, more than a marathon, each day for 3 months. The project, launched by Bata and his wife Nancy, is called the Monarch Ultra Trail, and it follows the migration path that monarch butterflies make in the air. Monarch butterflies are important pollinators that have had their habitats threatened by climate change in recent years. So much so that a 2021 report by the International Union for Conservation of Nature says their population shrunk between 22 and 72% over the last decade.
They started making lots of links between it and us, and as a species, and so what's basically happening to them is, I think, and I am profoundly convinced that it's a reflection of what might be happening to us.
It's a message he hopes will inspire future generations to think about ways to better protect the environment, like his own 10-year-old daughter, who will be traveling beside him in this RV.
It's to show our daughter that we can do something. We just need to begin somewhere, so that's the beginning for us.
The project involves 2 calls to action: planting milkweed seeds along the trail to create new habitats for the butterflies, and raising $4.5 million to help protect the endangered species. So far, Bata has raised more than $22,000. Sasha Tiemann, CTV News, Montreal.
After the break, digging deep into Roman ruins.
He really didn't want to be emperor. He wanted to go out there and sing.
Solving an ancient mystery that stumped archaeologists for decades. We leave you tonight with an amazing find in Rome. Ancient remains of a theater unearthed not far from the Vatican. The discovery came during some renovation work, and it gives a rare glimpse into the reign of a notorious Roman emperor. CTV's Bill Fortier has more.
Just steps away from St. Peter's Square, this Renaissance-era building isn't exactly new, but it turns out what's underneath is much older. During excavation to make way for a luxury hotel, archaeologists discovered ruins. Officials have now confirmed they're what's left of the Theater of Nero, built in the 1st century, partially dismantled in the 2nd, and lost for centuries. These columns are believed to be part of the stage. This city official says the excavation site is on the outskirts of the ancient city. Literary sources tell us Nero built a theater here, he says, where the emperor would rehearse and likely put on shows.
He really didn't want to be emperor. He wanted to go out there and sing.
A ruler and a performer. While popular with lower-class citizens, his lifestyle was considered scandalous to the powerful elite class, which eventually brought him down.
The aspect of Nero as the artist is a big element of how his reign progressed and also how it ended so badly.
Nero's theater wasn't ancient Rome's biggest, but it was big. You must imagine, says the project's chief archaeologist, the theater would go from here under the road, a diameter of around 42 meters. An ancient mystery now solved, but what's found will soon be lost again. Once important artifacts are recovered, construction is set to resume on the new hotel. Bill Fortier, CTV News, Edmonton.
That's it for us tonight. I'm John Ehrlichman for Sandy and all of us at CTV National News. Thanks for watching. Good night. We'll see you again tomorrow.